Donald Trump's Venezuela oil gamble. Could it be the boldest heist in history? He's targeting some of the world's largest oil reserves, but there's a catch. Venezuela's oil is a nightmare to extract. Heavy, dirty, and incredibly expensive to process. On paper, it looks like gold, but in reality, it's a massive headache. And here's the kicker. Despite all the promise, the odds of Venezuela's oil production ever reaching its peak again? Practically non-existent. But wait, Trump might have a plan that could flip the script. It's controversial and it's about to get interesting. Stick around because we're about to dive into the truth no one's talking about. Now, let's break it down. Trump's plan isn't just about seizing oil, it's about something much bigger. You've got a country with the world's largest proven oil reserves, yet it's a mess underground. Venezuela's oil is tough to tap into. It's heavy, dirty, and costly to process. It's not like the light, easy-to-pump oil you find elsewhere. It's a whole different beast. So why bother? Here's where things get tricky. Trump wants to bring American oil companies back to Venezuela, even though 2 waves of expropriation have made this a political minefield. Can this even work? And if it does, what does it mean for the U.S. and the rest of the world? Here's the claim. Trump's strategy is based on a massive gamble, and it's not looking great. The fact is, even if Trump manages to get more oil out of Venezuela, it's still a far cry from the 3 million barrels a day Venezuela once produced in its prime. Right now, they're barely scraping 1 million barrels. Experts say it's not realistic to think that number will ever reach those heights again without a huge investment. Think upwards of $100 billion. There's the problem. Big oil isn't willing to take that risk. The question is, why push for it at all? Well, there's a deeper game at play here, something even more complicated than the oil itself. Notice what they're not saying out loud. This might be more about geopolitical power than just oil. Now let's talk about the real kicker. Trump's plan hinges on private companies coming back to Venezuela, companies that were kicked out decades ago. And here's where it gets even messier. The U.S. has given special permission for some companies like Chevron to keep operating in Venezuela, despite the fact that the country's regime is internationally considered an outlaw. But that's just a short-term fix. The bigger issue is this: these companies have been burned before. Remember the hostile expropriation under Chavez? Exxon and Shell had their assets seized with no compensation, and they're still bitter about it. The trust is gone. The idea that these companies will suddenly rush back to Venezuela, pouring billions into a country with a history of asset theft and political instability seems almost absurd. And yet, that's what Trump's hoping for. This detail changes everything. It's not just about oil, it's about the unthinkable high-risk diplomacy of bringing back an industry that was already burned twice. But here's the thing, the stakes are higher than just oil companies coming back. In fact, everything is stacking up in a dangerous way. First, you've got the looming threat of the global oil market itself. Prices are low and oil companies are under extreme pressure to cut costs and focus on short-term profits. At the same time, Venezuela's oil is exactly the kind of product that U.S. refineries are built to process. But there's one big problem. Oil companies are hesitant to make massive long-term investments in a country that's been an economic disaster zone for over a decade. Second, add to the mix the geopolitical tensions. There's talk of U.S. intervention, of American companies seizing control of Venezuela's oil. The global backlash, it's coming, and it's going to be fierce. What happens if this continues? The pressure on both sides, politically, economically, could boil over at any moment. And the truth is, no one knows what happens next. Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the real-world impact of this gamble. For you, the viewer, this isn't just a game of high-stakes politics and oil. This is about people, real people, who are suffering from the fallout of this. Venezuela's economy has already been crushed under the weight of mismanagement, corruption, and now the weight of international sanctions. If this oil gamble somehow does pay off, who really benefits? It's not going to be the everyday Venezuelan. In fact, they're already bearing the brunt of this crisis, with food shortages, skyrocketing inflation, and unemployment hitting the hardest. The question becomes, how much more are they supposed to endure for a foreign oil grab? If this feels familiar, like you've seen this story play out before, drop a comment below and let's talk about it. This isn't just about Venezuela or even just about Trump. It's about the bigger picture, how systems of power operate behind the scenes. What's driving this? It's leverage. It's about how a handful of major oil companies, governments, and global financial systems manipulate markets and decisions for their own gain. Think about it. Venezuela's oil might be dirty, expensive, and hard to extract, but in the right hands, it can be a tool for reshaping geopolitics. The U.S. has long relied on oil for economic and military power, but now, with the rise of cleaner energy, a shift is happening. And yet the fossil fuel industry is fighting tooth and nail to keep its grip. This isn't just about fossil fuels. This is a system trying to preserve its dominance in the face of an inevitable transformation. And that system, it's not designed to help the average person. It's designed to keep power where it's always been. So, where does this all lead? There are two paths forward here. First, we could see the U.S. double down on this oil push, pouring billions into Venezuela. This might temporarily boost oil production and give Trump the short-term political win he's looking for. But there's a catch. If oil prices stay low, those investments will go nowhere. Even if oil companies bite, they're not going to sink money into a country that could collapse under its own weight at any moment. The second path, the oil gamble falls apart, and Trump's push for Venezuelan oil fades into history. The U.S. will look for new sources of energy, more sustainable options, and the global oil landscape will shift, leaving Venezuela's reserves still trapped in the ground. Either way, this isn't a simple decision. What happens next is still up in the air. But make no mistake, the next move is already taking shape. Here's the big takeaway. Trump's Venezuela oil gamble might just be the last hurrah of a dying industry. It's a short-term fix in an energy world that's rapidly changing. The deeper question is this: is it worth the gamble? The global energy market is shifting, and while Venezuela's oil might be a prize, it's also a symbol of an outdated system trying to hold on. The long-term future is already here. Cleaner energy, smarter investments, and a world moving past fossil fuels. So, what happens when the last of the fossil fuel giants finally realize their time is up? The answer is still unfolding. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. If you want to keep up with how the world of energy and politics is changing, make sure you hit that follow button for more.